But now let's just check in about these processes to get these judges into their various seats. I'm joined now to help us unpack all of this by the Senior Research Officer at the University of Cape Town, Chris Oxtoby. Chris, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. When I set out to talk to you, I said to the producer, I wanted to talk to you about the Chief Justice. But before we get there, about the next steps, I'm sure you are, like many of us, following this process of filling up the other two vacancies that have opened up at the Constitutional Court, especially after the debacle we saw that played itself out in April. But now today, we're seeing people, various possible replacements or candidates being interviewed. Your sense, just from far, about today's process? I know it's still underway. What do you think? How is it going this time around?
Well, thank you very much, Dan. As you say, there are two big processes going on. So I've been in doing several interviews on both of them. So I haven't been able to follow the interviews as closely as I normally would. My sense from what I have seen and from what I've heard from colleagues who are also watching it is that things are so far going fairly harmoniously. I'm not aware that there have been any of the really problematic lines of questioning that we saw in April that led to that CASAC challenge that meant that we have the rerun today. So fingers crossed and touch wood, we're going to come out of this round unscathed and without a legal challenge to them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what word to use in asking the next question, because Judge Pillay said she's not going to appear. She won't be sitting in this rerun. From a rerun perspective, is it good in terms of our judiciary that there is a proper rerun after that constitutional challenge by CASAC?
I think it is important that the rerun happened. Of course, the difficulty it's created is that, as you say, we have two vacancies that were supposed to be filled after the April interviews, and those have not been filled because of the need for the rerun. And those vacancies go back quite long. I mean, the one is for Justice Cameron, which goes back to 2019, if I'm not mistaken, when his tenure came to an end. And the other being Justice Froneman's position, which became vacant, if I'm not mistaken, last year. So it's taken a long time to get here. That is problematic, and it's unfortunate that there was a delay because of the litigation. But on broader principle, I think there were such problems in those April interviews that it was important that a marker got set down to say that this is not how they should happen, and they're going to be done differently in future. And one just hopes that the JSC does better in future.
Yeah, and maybe this rerun, after they've had it, they should also move a bit swifter, swiftly rather, to make the appointment so that we get a full bench there. Well, thank you for that. Okay, let's now shift gears and focus on the other important judicial process that's going to be underway, and the reason for which I asked to talk to you this afternoon, really. The President has opened up the appointment for the Chief Justice for public nomination. I was at a media briefing last week where he talked to us, and he was asked the question, why is he doing this? Is he like handing over responsibility? Because constitutionally, he's the one who should appoint the next Chief Justice, but he said he wanted the process to be more inclusive in terms of who will replace Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng after he vacates the seats on the 11th of this month. But of course, the process is going to take longer than that date. Is the President proceeding in the right way here, in your view?
So if one thinks back to the appointment of the outgoing Chief Justice, Mogoeng Mogoeng, and when he was put forward by then President Zuma to be the next Chief Justice in 2011, there was a lot of unhappiness and a lot of contestation around that appointment, some of which was people saying, well, the President shouldn't only be putting one candidate forward. What about the opportunity to consider the merits of other candidates? And of course, I think at the time, many people had an eye on the then Deputy Chief Justice, Mogoeng Mogoeng, who very many people thought was worthy of that position. So So I think one has to see it in that context, and this is what a different approach can look like. I personally think it's a positive development. I don't believe it means the president is washing his hands of the responsibility to make the decision. As I understand the process, the president will still make an ultimate decision based on the candidates that come through the panel process and then on the subsequent JSC interview. But I think for such an important position, as the head of the judiciary, a really important branch of government, to have the opportunity for people to make their voices heard and to make their contributions, I think is important for the credibility of the process and for people to feel part of that process. So I personally think it's a good thing. I mean, yes, it may lead to some surprising nominations, and that may raise eyebrows or cause concerns in some cases. But I do think the president will retain the ultimate power to make the appointment. I don't think there's a constitutional problem in that respect. So I view it as a positive.
Okay, so what should be the next steps from your understanding as a research officer who's watching this very closely? What should we in the public expect next in terms of the process to appoint a replacement for the Chief Justice?
So I think the very next thing that needs to happen as nominations to the panel closed on Friday, we should expect the long list of who those nominations were to be released. I would hope today. I would hope that we would see that immediately today, because the next point on the timeline is that any objections or adverse comments to those candidates is due by, I believe, the 15th of October. Then the panel will consider those nominations, any objections, and by the end of October, we should expect them to put a list of candidates to the president. And then those candidates will go through the usual process of interview by the Judicial Service Commission and consultation with political parties. I think one other thing that's really important to watch out for that also needs to happen as soon as possible is that the panel needs to publish and identify the criteria by which they are going to be evaluating these candidates. They have said in a press release that this is going to happen, but I think it's really important for the credibility of the process that we see the panel articulate themselves as to exactly what basis they are going to use to decide who to put forward to the president on the shortlist. So I think that's certainly something that one should watch out for and put pressure on to make sure that it happens.
Okay, finally and very briefly, should we therefore expect, like the president has done, opening it up for public nomination, that when the JSC sits next and to interview that short list of possible candidates for Chief Justice position, it will be held in public like we're witnessing today with those two vacancies in the Constitutional Court?
Absolutely. It's been the JSC's practice right from the beginning to hold interviews in public, and obviously this is as important, if not more important, than all other interviews for this to be held in public. So we should certainly expect the JSC interviews to be in public, yes.
Yeah, Chris, I will definitely touch base with you once we see those lists and the nominations and the process that's kicking in. Thank you very much for your time and your insights this afternoon here on the Midday View on ENCA DSTV Channel 43. That's Chris Oxtoby. He's a senior research officer at the University of Cape Town, following very closely what's happening in terms of these judicial vacancies that are around. There's two processes, as I wrap here, just to clarify. The one that's happening today is to fill two positions that became vacant as early as 2019 when Judge Edwin Cameron stepped down from the Constitutional Court. Those two vacancies have to be filled. That's today's process. But later on, very shortly, there's a process on its own to replace the Chief Justice, Mogoeng Mogoeng, who steps down on the 11th of October. That's the other part I was discussing just now. It's going to be very interesting and for everybody to follow. We'll have to wait and see who gets nominated to become the new Chief Justice.